Great Palast.
Yes.
This is Leroy, Brother Leroy in New York.
Hey, Leroy.
Great day to you. You are at the wisdom table. The same
I'm
table
glad to be.
the same as last week. And
Yes,
what we're looking at is what you see in Georgia and what you see in Florida.
that's right. And if you have a chance, I hope we can bring it. Well, I was in Florida for the vote, and what I saw was massive, massive vote, blocking the black vote in a way I haven't seen in the last 18 years of reporting on the subject. It was ugly. I don't know if you have it, but we can play it, but I have a 59-second tape of Martin Luther King, 92-year-old cousin. She was not allowed to vote at the voting station where she's gone every year since her cousin was murdered in 1968. This was going to be her 50th year of voting, and they wouldn't let her vote. And you have to go to greatpalast.com and watch this. That's GREGPALAST, greatpalast.com, and you can see this woman, 92-year-old woman, great dignity, saying she's been voting here, they wouldn't give her a ballot. And her granddaughter, who is saying, you know, this is just, she was in tears. She was totally broken down because imagine taking the vote away from her. This woman, who is the center of the civil rights movement, thought, oh, this is my 50th year of voting. And that's what's going on all over the state. I've got it on film. Again, if you go to my site. And I went to the polls. I met King's cousin, because I went to the polls with the great filmmaker, Raheem Shabazz. He's actually from New York. I hope you'll have a chance to get him on the air at some point. He'd seen his name at gregpalast.com on my purge. I put out the names of all the purge voters. He contacted me. He was shocked that he was removed from the voter rolls because they don't get any notice when they remove people. He was illegally removed from the voter rolls. On the grounds he had moved out of the state or moved out of the county. He moved down the street. He moved down the street. Not out of the county, not out of the state. He didn't have to re-register. It was legal to vote where he originally, from his original address and from his new address. And he was blocked. He was given a provisional ballot. And we know at least 28,000 Georgians were given provisional ballots. These are kind of, you know from New York, they're kind of placebo ballots. Most of the time, they don't count. There's a fight in court right now. The Brennan Center for Justice with Common Cause is in court right now where a judge has said, you're going to have to start counting these ballots, these provisional ballots. But what's even worse, brother, is that there were voters who went in and were refused provisional ballots. So all over the state, people were being refused the right under federal law to get a provisional ballot, which then you could fight for in court. So, I mean, it is the ugliest Jim Crow operation I've seen since Florida in 2000.
Great Palast, you can't be the smartest journalist out there. And I'm saying that sincerely. How come we're not hearing that piece? We're hearing about recount. Bear with me. We're hearing about recounts or recounts, but we're not hearing about that portion of the election story of the democracy being denied to the voters. We're not. I mean, we're talking about big chunks of improprieties.
He's talking about at least a third of 1,000,000 voters in Georgia wrongly removed from the voter rolls. They got no notice. If you speak to Raheem Shabazz, he got no notice. None of them get notice. We have this woman, Yasmin Bakhtiari. She didn't get any notice, and she was refused this provisional ballot. So the whole thing has to be rerun. And they should. I'm trying to get my information, my expert reports down into the courtrooms, because I think that if Judge Totenberg gets the real info, that she'll simply order the rerun. Because Stacey Abrams even by the illegal way they're counting the ballots, or failing to count the ballots. They refusal to count the ballots. They've challenged 5,000 absentee ballots on the grounds that the signatures didn't match, which is baloney. They're saying that people stole those ballots and filled them up. There's no evidence of that. So they're trying to block the counting of 5,000 ballots. That's number one. Number two, they're not counting the provisional ballots. They're 28,000. Almost all of those are Stacey Abrams voters. They're not counting, and then of course they can't count all the voters who were purged, who didn't show up because they didn't get a voting card, or they showed up and they were told you can't have a provisional ballot. That's not small. It's tens of thousands of people. Stacey Abrams only short of a rerun by like 8,000 votes, 6,000 votes. And so if they count the absentee ballots, if they count the provisional ballot, that alone would qualify her for the rerun. And then we have to argue to let these 340,000 Trojans back on the voter rolls so they can vote in the rerun. You know, they were denied their right to vote. They've got to have the right to vote. That's it.
So,
You know?
so Greg, I'm rephrasing the question. It really relates to, and not from a naive standpoint. That story is so big about the denial of democracy to these voters that
Yes.
it has to. How do they keep it out of the news? How do they keep it? Are you the only?
Well, let's ask the people at Petroleum Radio. Ask the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I finally got a call from the New York Times. If anyone from the New York Times is listening, now this week the New York Times asked all my information on the Georgia purges, not for a story this week, but for a local story, which I'm happy to work with them to do. But hey, guys, I issued this information publicly weeks ago, a month ago. And I got, and the New York Times just sat on this stuff. I mean, just sat on it, and yet we have this is not stuff I'm kind of guessing at. We have these expert reports. I got the purge list through litigation, something, that these African American reporters don't do, which is to fight for the information. It's pretty rare. So, yeah, so Brian Kent says I'm wrong, so that meant that I couldn't get coverage even in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. These are crappy papers. These are why these papers are going under, for good reason. They don't provide the news. And, that's the problem. It's not fake news. It's hiding the real news.
That's it. So Kemp, after he thinks he wins the election, he steps out of the role of Secretary of State. Just for,
it's a joke. He's already Brian Kemp was sued that he couldn't have both jobs, Secretary of State and a candidate. Well, wait a minute. How come this suit? I have to say about this. I like this organization sued, but hey guys, how about suing him before he conducted the purges? How about getting him out of there before he massively purged the voter rolls and then said he can't get a provisional ballot? How come they didn't remove him when those signatures are being challenged? In other words, he basically did all of the purging, the canceling people's registration, stopping the vote counting, all that stuff, and then he resigned. After the vote, say, okay, well, I can resign as Secretary of State, put in one of my flunkies, while I kind of move my furniture into the State House. That's insane.
So now, with the prospect of a recount, well, his flunky is in position, but he's not in position to do the machinations. And in fact,
the Republicans, it's so controlled by Republicans, it's a partisan office. These guys, the whole Secretary of State's office is a partisan cesspool of Republican hacked and trying to reverse the election through these racist tactics. It's that simple. And then we move to Florida where we have, a similar repeat. Different.
But the talk about what you've heard about the denial of democracy to folks in Florida.
Okay, I sent my team into Florida, and we're gonna have a blade or a film today at GregPalast.com, in which you have a repeat of what happened in 2000. If you're old enough, you know that this is Greg Palast. I did a story about how black voters were removed from the voter roll of Florida in 2000 by Katherine Harris and the Governor Jeb Bush. They removed tens of thousands of black folk on the grounds that they were ex-cons who couldn't vote. Not true. Not one of the people on their list, not a single one, was an illegal voter, but their crime was voting while black. Tens of thousands of black people removed. George Bush wins Florida by 537 votes. That's all, 500 votes after removing thousands of black men. So, to try to prevent the count of the votes, Republicans started rioting in Dade County, Miami County. Republicans are rioting literally at the voting offices. White people smashing and banging on the windows in the voting office. If you did that, you'd be in prison. You would have a felony crime. But you got these white guys who were smashing and banging on the windows and stopping the vote count in Florida. And now they're back at it again in 2018 trying to stop the count of the vote. Last time they were successful, but this time it may not happen that way. Because this time you have African American voting official, and in Broward County, which is Lauderdale, and Dade, which is Miami, and they're not so quick to give in to threats. And you have Proud Boys, you know, the racist, the white supremacist group in front of the Broward County building, right, trying to create a riot to stop the count of the vote. And then you have a lot of Black Votes Matter people saying, count the vote, count the votes. And what I have on film is that the people, that the white supremacists who are saying, don't count the votes, don't count the votes, they are, one of them pushed one of the PR person for the Black Votes Matter group and called her the N-word. We have that on film, by the way. We have that on film. Called her the N-word, and you know, these people are violent, and they're even saying, hang, you know, lynch the black woman running the vote count in Broward. This is what's going on. You know, it's not back to 2000. It's like back to 1958 is what they're trying to do.
Okay.
We're talking about trying to lynch black people for counting votes.
The wisdom table is open. Questions, comments. Been digesting what you've been sharing with me.
There's a lot there.
And, you know the thing with what is so glaring, and I'm repeating myself, about the stories, they mention nothing about the denial of voting rights. That is, I call it the denial of democracy to black voters in
right,
Georgia and in Florida. I mean, the thing is huge, and it's nowhere in the report. The reports that we hear and the reports that we read, and that we thank you for doing what you've been doing, especially on the internet. Your newsletter is Justice Initiative, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Justice Initiative, and so questions from the table.
So it's just shocking to say the way they let them get away with things. You know, it's really shocking.
The young lady said it's just amazing the way they let them get away with things. And I'm adding on to that, from my perspective, the lack of fighting that Gore did and the lack of fighting that Kerry did in those elections that were stolen for Bush Jr. Now, talk about that so-called phenomena of the Democrats not fighting.
Well, you do. Not all Democrats won't fight. Stacey Abrams is a Democrat, and she's doing something that Democrats have never done before. She's saying, count every vote. I'm not conceding. We're going to count every vote, and I'd like to see if she's going to actually bring a lawsuit. I mean, you have to say Al Gore did bring a lawsuit, and it went to the Supreme Court, which, of course, basically the Supreme Court right-wing five simply picked George Bush as president. But at least Gore did file a suit. I'd like to see Stacey Abrams file a suit, but there's plenty of suits right now, and she's saying, count all the votes. I'm not leaving here until all the votes are counted. And that's something that just hasn't been done. And I was, very frankly, I was really disappointed that Gillum conceded before the votes were counted. And then he took back his concession. But that's the problem we do have with the Democratic Party, but not all Democrats. For the most part, it's just the white congressional caucus, to be honest. But I was really sorry to see Gillum join that very sad tradition of Democrats conceding the vote even before it's counted. Now he's taken back his concession because he counts all the votes, he's going to win. But, it's a very, very bad precedent and very disappointing. And Democrats have got to start making vote counting a big issue. I can tell you that when I was in Mexico in 2006, and the election was stolen from Lopez Obrador, he stayed in a demonstration. They camped for 6 months in the Central Square in Mexico demanding the count of votes. When he re-ran again this year in July, he said the number one issue is counting every vote. And because he fought, people were impressed that he fought. And that he won, his party won, swept the Congress, swept the presidential race. Okay. This is what happens if you stand up. And, Stacey Abrams is standing up, and that's really unusual.
Very, very good. Good insight.
You hear this before elections, during elections, and after elections, that black people don't vote. And it's almost like you're almost at a point where you say, black people need to vote. But I don't think that's true. I think black people vote.
Yes.
And
if they have a candidate and they have an opportunity. Right. So what we saw in Georgia, what we saw in Alabama, what we saw was a black vote, which is higher percentage turnout among blacks than whites in Alabama and Georgia and elsewhere. A higher percentage than white voters. They said, so how did that happen? And so the answer is you give people candidates that they want to vote for, and they will. Okay? That's number one.
Okay. That's you still there, Greg?
Something happened.
Cut off.
Let's see. That might be yours. Greg?
Cut off.
Greg?
We don't vote. We don't vote. I know. But people just get disgusted. Well, nobody's voting. They always tricking and they get shot. It's a trick.
People go and vote, but just how do they let us know who's doing what?
You remember that thing that you had to pull, turn, or whatever? I said, I know that shit goes and I'm not.
Any questions?
No.
Okay, Greg, we're back.
There was a time, I don't know whether it was a primary or the actual election. It might have been a primary in Brooklyn. A story went out that a whole section of the black community didn't. Can you hear me?
Greg, I'm gonna call you back. We're having interference.
You remember that?
Happened.
There's when information is getting out, even in a small situation like this, it's very serious to other people. To us, it's just a malfunction, but it ain't.
We're on the list, right?
We're on the list.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Greg, we're back.
Okay. There was a story that went out during the time of Obama's initial election, wherein a whole community in Brooklyn, New York, a black community, there was not one vote that went for Obama.
That was in the primary.
Well,
It was
In the
probably in the
primary.
primary, I
Yeah.
don't remember.
Well, it's-
But not a whole community of black folks did not vote for Obama.
Obama.
Well, we have, like you say, you have problems in New York too. As you know, Andrew Cuomo has resisted having early voting in New York.
Yeah.
New York's one of the only states without early voting. And everyone knows, every politician knows, when you have early voting, you have more black voting because you have souls to the polls, people without cars going, church buses on the Sunday before the election.
Yeah.
And the fact that you don't have early voting, the fact that you have way too many provisional votes, you have questionable, removal of people for not voting, which is against the law. You have a lot of problems in New York, a lot. And there's a lot of, like it or not, there's a lot of Jim Crow tactics still used in New York because even the Democratic Party does not want too big of a black vote. And that's just the truth, because that would change the Democratic Party of New York.
Yeah.
And so you still have vote suppression in New York by, that's really the Cuomo faction of the party.
Thank you.
Greg, explain that. What you said about the Democrats don't want a large black turnout or voting bloc.
Well, because you have a very different Democratic Party and different candidates. Andrew Cuomo does not want a gigantically black-controlled party. He's made that clear by using methods which reduce black voting.
That's right.
And the machine in Brooklyn, I remember the machine in Brooklyn was hostile to African Americans when I was there. And the other is, like I say, one of the big issues in New York is early voting. Why don't we have early voting in New York? And why don't we have automatic registration? Oregon has automatic registration. California is moving to automatic registration. What is the problem with automatic registration in New York? When when you turn 18, you're or you get a driver's license, you're automatically registered unless you say I'm not a citizen, or you say I don't want to be registered. You have a right not to be registered. But why are we going through all these hoops to register people? Why did the Brooklyn machine in June of 2016 purge over 100,000 people just before the election, which is illegal? I just have to say that New York is a hostile environment to a lot of voters, and that has to be addressed. It's not just Georgia. Yeah, Georgia's worse. You're not Georgia, but that doesn't mean that you're also not Oregon, where they actually let people vote.
Greg, in terms of your vocation as a investigative journalist, I want you to define investigative journalist for us.
It's one who uncovers the truth that the officials and the corporations don't want you to expose.
Okay.
And that just does not happen very much in the United States. That's why I worked for the BBC and the Guardian and Rolling Stone. But the mainstream media in the U.S. really is a very, very timid, and they don't like to confront power. They just don't. And they certainly don't like to confront economic power.
And what led you into journalism? What led you into investigative journalism?
Well, I used to be an investigator before I was an investigative journalist. In fact, I worked for the Attorney General of New York and the state of New York, but I also worked for attorneys general around the country and around the world. I was working with organizations. So I was an investigator, but I was finding that the press was not printing the stories of the real investigations that I was doing for court in courtrooms. Mm-hmm. So I decided to write the story myself, and I quickly found that I could report for BBC, and I could report for the Guardian, I could report overseas, I could report in England and everywhere else, but not in my own country. It was very, very difficult to report real, true investigative, original investigative reporting in New York
in the
United States.
what was the eye opener that prompted you?
So I have to move on because now I have to get back to the investigation. I'm getting tons of calls from Georgia, and I have to deal with the people on the ground there. Okay.
All right. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Greg.
You're very welcome, and try to bring on Raheem Shabazz from Georgia. He'll fill you in from the ground.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, dude.
Straight with no chaser.
You know Eric Schneiderman?
Mhm.
I was away for early part. I left it in my car, the newspaper.
Mhm.
When I returned, I'm looking. In fact, we were talking, and I was telling you about the headline. And then I turned to this page 2, and Eric Schneiderman, who ran havoc over these women in his office, talk about sexual assault. I'll try and take a picture of the article and send it around.
He was a New York State Attorney General.
Yes, he was.
Mhm.
And now he's free.
So no
See, you missed it too.
prosecution.
No prosecution.
Really?
No one has brought up criminal charges.
Charge against
And
them.
mind you, he so assaulted these women. I don't know what assault means anymore because it could be just touching
Exactly.
somebody or bumping in. But he so assaulted these women. He threatened them that they would lose their job. You know
That's
another.
what all of them did.
True.
That's why all
But
of them
the
did.
attorney
That's
general.
why they did what they wanted them to do, to hold on to their job. Well, if I'm not satisfied with my job, why should I stay there? What good is that job to you? You're not comfortable there. How you gonna do your work there?
That's true.
Can't work in a hostile environment.
That's right.
That's true.
But these women prefer to stay there. For what reason? So to me, you must be like what you're doing.
Well, maybe they were staying for another reason.
Okay.
We'll go around the table and the sofa, and based on your time this afternoon, what did you learn that you didn't know before?
Not too much on this voting, because it's the same thing all the time. But
Repeat of
there are a couple of things I was trying to understand him.
This last fellow or
No, the
Gerald
first one.
Holmes? Yeah, Gerald
Oh.
Holmes.
But the other one wasn't that interested in things that I never thought of. But I've been hearing that last stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of it, but some of it, most part. So it didn't even hit me too much.
Yeah. Well, Gerald Horn, I hate to say, I know he's a prolific writer, but I have not really heard, I have not read his books. But I know of the many books that he's written through Utrice Lead.
Mm-hmm.
But I will look up the Scottsboro Boys, because he said that was sort of like a children's book. And I love children's books. I learned so much history from children's books.
Children books.
You know, and when I was in school, one of the professors said, children's books are wonderful. You learn a lot from them. And, you know, sometimes the author makes it simple enough for you to understand it, and then you can expand on it. You know, so I'm looking at the Scottsboro Boys because those boys have come up. They're men now, if they're alive. But it's so. I think you could teach your young people about rape and white women telling on the black man. You know, which happened with the Scottsboro Boys. Am I correct?
The Scottsboro Boys and
Emmett Till, yeah.
And the teaching. I'm adding to what you're saying. It's accusations coming from white women. That's and then it spans from the smallest thing to rape to assault. We come up looking at TV, and they are the standards of beauty. They are the standards of intelligence. I'm talking about white folks, and then the sub of that is white women, and our children grow up believing them even before they get into a classroom.
That's right.
And that authority figure is in that classroom, and they will tell lies on the children.
And they don't even know because they don't know. So.
Yeah, and the parent don't know.
Or the authority in the classroom.
Look, to me, it really is about the same. What did your master do when he didn't want his wife? He wanted the black woman, right? So what did he do? He either raped her.
He took her, that's what he did.
He did what he wanted to do. So what's the
He came
difference?
out light-skinned.
What's the difference?
It's what we're talking about. You're adding to it as to how we have to politicize our children.
They just changed the word around for our children to.
Well, they did you hear about the boy, the young man in Detroit who started a garden in the playground?
Mm-hmm.
And the 3 white women came up with all kinds of charges against him because they didn't want him to have a garden in the playground.
The area.
And among the charges was that they charged him as being a pedophile. They charged him as stalking them. These are 3 different white women. So our children, did you see the movie Get Out, Sister Jenkins?
Yeah, we saw it.
You saw it.
We saw it.
You saw it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Scottsboro case. That's the Scottsboro.
Yeah, well, you know,
Well,
I mean, I know you're all tired of hearing me saying Bill Cosby. That's the Scottsboro case.
No, that is absolutely.
You know,
What they're knocking out the cases against Weinstein, Harvey
Yeah.
Weinstein. Every day, not every day, every week, you see
he's
something.
got something different.
Right, that they're knocking out.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing happened, but it's not being reported for Bill Cosby.
right.
It's not being reported for Bill Cosby because the stake is to be put into that man's chest so he would never get up again.
Mm-hmm.
But my mom would say this and I'd get angry. I say it now. God is in control.
That's right.
Amen.
And that information, when it gets out,
You are not gonna like it.
The lady who coined the phrase Me Too, hashtag Me Too,
Yeah.
her name is Tarana, what's her last name? Tarana Burke. And I was just wondering if there was a possibility of getting to her and having her speak.
yeah.
Would you all be interested in?
Yeah, sure. we
Okay.
will.
They're panning her a lot, but she may need to be panned. You know, I don't know. I don't know what has happened in her situation, but I know Oprah came out not too long after hashtag Me Too,
Right.
and she started hashtag Time's Up. From where I sat it was to checkmate this black woman.
It was interesting.
You know, money is rolling in for these organizations like Me Too, but now I don't know if it's being diverted. I might never know.
Because they don't even
Time's Up.
talk about it.
Right. And this is a young woman, Miss Burke, and I don't know if she's ever had the opportunity to speak to like a wisdom table kind of course.
Because look, I'm answering you, Sister Hyatt, and this is for us. Pardon me. There is one brother Leroy, and that one brother Leroy is always going to be that one brother Leroy. However, the task that brother Leroy is involved in is getting information to our people. That can be done by each one of you. All you got to do is say, look, I got it this week, bam. And then we go, and you got to get into this thing, because if there are 6 sisters who are coming to the wisdom table, you got 6 different shows that you can do. You can do a show on recipes. You can do a show on taking care of your baby. You can do a show on sayings that I got from my grandmother, and the people call in from the housing development. Yeah, let me give you this sound. This. And you can do shows like that. Wisdom. We are such a great people, and age is in the Caucasians' world. But in other words, when you reach a certain age, you retire, you give up, you ain't no use no more, and blah blah blah. You can't be a teacher, for example. You can't be a teacher. You can't be a retired teacher, and our children walking up and down the street don't know how to read basic books.
Absolutely.
You gotta start something in your church. I don't care if your church has a handful of people, like that sister come who was doing the show after this. I don't care if it's a handful of people. You gotta have some kind of missionary work to teach our children. If you're teaching Jesus, you gotta teach the children how to spell Jesus, God, the cross,
Yes.
resurrection, and do good.
Yeah.
We start in our own families, though. Start that church in our own family. When I say start that church, start that in our own families. Take them through the Bible. Take them through the Proverbs. Have them read that. Proverbs are going to be a big help for us. Our children are coming up without any notion of a God. So you can't. You can't. It makes it difficult.
That's true.
So each one of us, in terms of inviting people to a show, we have everyone here who can do a show. But if you don't want to do a separate show, you do a collective show, because that's how we started out. But each one of you now you can ask questions. Questions does not depend on a person's so-called education or how clear they speak and whatnot. No. Questions involve gut feel. Wait a minute. You just said something. You got to break that down to me. I don't. Go over that again. You know, if you don't get it the third time, then you pass on. And when you do that, you're actually helping people in the audience, because the people didn't understand. If you don't understand something that was said or didn't hear it, then there are a whole lot of other people who didn't hear it. Now, this show goes up on the internet, and people look at the show. People will see the show. People will see the show. But no, we can get her. There's another lady in the city. Her name is Bertha Lewis. Bertha Lewis is a bad lady. When I say a bad lady, she don't take no tea for the fever.
She's out of Brooklyn.
I don't know where she's based at. I'll have to track it down. Bertha Lewis, that's the one they lied on.
I know who she is.
Her organization was Acorn. And Acorn was an independent group able to mobilize people and get out votes. And so they had to crush that. And they came up with a lie. And they effectively crushed that during the time of Obama. Obama had from my little experience, if somebody was in Obama's cabinet or connected to it, however connected to it, and the Republicans started some kind of campaign against it, he would drop them immediately. Shoot. He dropped the white woman during the campaign. He dropped the black woman from the Department of Agriculture. Can't remember her name, but they feared that lady because she comes with a wealth of information that would get monies to black farmers. Because the department.
Wait a minute, wasn't that something like that on TV the other night?
I didn't see.
I don't remember all of it.
I forgot her
What?
name.
It was about Obama, how he came up when he was going to college and whatever. They had a little bit of everything in it. He had, nothing but 2 groups.
Nothing but what?
He had 2 groups that he was helping, like a black neighborhood.
Did they say my brother's keeper? Did they
I
mention
think
that?
they had some of that in there. He was dealing with the church and a black neighborhood.
Oh, you talking about Reverend Wright? And he was a member of Reverend Wright's church.
I was doing something and they brought up Obama's picture.
Okay.
They
Well,
were on TV the other night.
the thing I was talking about
On
is
BET.
Obama never let anything be a cross around his neck.
That's true.
He dropped the people quick.
And the woman you're talking about, whose name I can't remember, with the farmers, as soon as the word got out on her, I don't even know what they said about her.
They put together a tape.
Yeah.
She was in a meeting, and they put the tape together as though she was against white farmers and only for black farmers. That was a fake tape. The thing was fake. She didn't even have a chance to defend herself.
So before she could go to her next assignment, the head of agriculture, white man,
Yeah.
called her on her phone, told her to pull over, because she was going from one county to the next somewhere,
Yeah, she was.
and told her
That's
told her to write out her resignation now. Isn't that so?
That's the way it happened. No
That's the way it
investigation.
happened.
Then the stuff came out after that
Yeah.
they had doctored, that they had fixed up this tape, and it was a team of these people who were doing just that. They would go around and then get people in conversation, and that's what the Acorn was. The Acorn, they had a woman talking to a white, to this couple, and she was. They had as though she was telling them how to cheat the system.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was the Acorn.
they had them in a basement. They had them in a church basement. They had them. They met all over the different places.
So Bertha Lewis.
But you know who got Bertha Lewis? Breitbart, that crew,
Right.
and who came out of Breitbart was Barnum, Trump's man.
Yeah,
Stroud.
they had them standing up in the church.
Okay, Bannon.
Yeah. Now the lady in the
That's so
Department
much
of
stuff.
Agriculture,
Yeah.
I interviewed her uncle, and this is before Obama, and he was in the Department of Agriculture. His brother was the lady's father,
Okay.
and his brother had done work for almost like a partnership with this white guy, and backed out of it doing mechanic work, working on cars. And the white guy didn't like the fact that he broke off working for him and came to the farm and shot him dead. And so the uncle, the man that I interviewed, had been in World War II, and he wrote a book called Democracy on Hold. And he talked about how if you were in a family, if you were in a black family, well, anyway, they would draft. He talked about how they would draft you and leave the whites. He said he had a cousin who was lynched in front of the courthouse at some point in time. But when it was time for the draft for World War II, he said, you go up to the courthouse. This is an interview. You go up to the courthouse, and they say, we hope them Germans kill you niggas. As they're processing you
Yeah.
to go away.
Go to war, yeah.
He said these are the ones who were left behind. The whites were left behind. They took the blacks. But he gave me an appreciation of what this young lady was going to offer, because he became her big uncle father. So he had taught her about the
And when her father was
Father.
killed like that, she was in her first year of college. And
no. She was in her mother's arm. She was in her mother's arm.
That's why
Killed
we
her
need this
in
information.
front.
Oh.
Killed the man in front of his family.
Well,
So
well, they offered this woman, and I'm gonna finish, a job after they found out, the one they told her to
Yeah.
pull over. They offered her something when they found out the truth. And she said,
No, I wouldn't take it.
no
neither.
way. No,
I wouldn't
sorry.
take it.
They offered.
Because then you're gonna turn around the next minute and tell me I paid you for it.
Right, that's right.
She
You
said
know,
she
if
wouldn't
they-
even take the Secretary of Agriculture's job.
Because you are set up, man. If you could sit up and call and tell me to pull over and do what,
She did.
what would you do with me next? Huh?
That's right.
You told me you wanted to jail. You got paper signed it up. You paid me. I don't need that.
And you know who knows the story even better?
Jeruba.
Jerubu
Hill.
Hill. She would
Okay.
know that story. And also Rose, who was arrested a few months ago.
Oh, Faber. The one
Fire
in-
Rose. Fire Rose.
The one in
Sanders.
Alabama.
Yeah. She would
Okay.
know.
All right. So think of guests
Think of
that you
that.
would like, or topics that you would like to pursue,
Mhm.
and
One you
we do that.
suggested.
Anything come to mind as it relates to yourself, or as it relates to children, as it relates to health?
Well, I would like to talk to Doctor again about health. Gotta keep up on your health.
Oh,
Like the
any,
ball.
Dr. Bo.
any particular ailments that you want her to have knowledge on? Lupus?
yeah.
Lupus or either the clock.
Yeah.
Because that's doing a lot of things now with the clocks.
C?
Clocks?
Blood clot?
clots.
Blood clot?
Oh,
Blood
blood
clots.
clots. Okay. Okay.
Because it
That's
seems
good.
that it's passing around now. A lot of people are getting blood clots, especially around here.
First thing you gotta do is look at the diet.
Yeah.
Gotta look at the diet. I don't, that's the first, when it's called a cluster. When you have that kind of thing happening, and you start talking to individual people, what comes to mind, find out how often they get Popeye's chicken. Find that out.
How often do you get Popeye
How
chicken?
often you get it?
Let me tell you.
Every week.
I got so
That's
sick
it.
on Popeyes. I asked the Lord. I hardly got home.
Wow.
I asked the Lord if He would save me this time. I wouldn't. I don't even want to drive by a Popeye. Don't tell me you're into Popeye.
Yes.
I
It's
ain't into
sick,
Papa.
and I don't know whether it's
Popeye.
oil. You're not into
Popeye,
Popeye?
yeah.
I don't know if it's the oil they cook the
Big guy.
chicken. I said,
Okay. Oh.
My great,
Okay.
this is Harriet Tubman. She said if the
If they
Negroes
knew-
knew they were slaves, how did they got more out of the South?
so you saying if they knew what they were eating?
Yeah, you got to do that.
Yes.
All the way and it's not being a doctor. Go down the list. What have you been eating? What kind of meats do you eat? Fast food. What kind of
Here you go.
fast food?
Yeah.
What kind of junk
Fast
food?
food, Chinese food.
Wow.
Flax.
No. I'd rather eat out of my own house than to eat out of the restaurant. If you're gonna be lazy, Be lazy. Get your peanut butter and jelly sandwich and eat that. Eat going. And some water.
You remember they sold that in the school lunches? Not sold it, but they gave that out.
That's right, Lydia.
That's what they had in school lunches.
School
when I was
lunches?
going there. You get
Hey.
that smack of peanut butter and jelly,
And some soup.
or either you get that soup and that
Homemade
cheese,
soup.
I used
and
to,
that one
soup.
slice
I
of
used to
bread.
pretend,
Ain't nothing wrong with
I used to
peanut butter and
pretend
jelly.
that I
love
didn't
it.
want it.
Me too.
And
And
at
I
the end of the
still
day,
eat
they
it.
have the sandwiches left
I
over.
keep my house keep a
It'd be peanut butter jelly and cream cheese. That's what I remember.
Peanut butter
Well,
jelly, where you
I take this bad boy.
That's right. Either way you want to put it, I take it with a glass of water. Keep me
You want to give us a close there, Brother
Okay.
Leroy?
This has been,
Need a milk.
as you
Yeah.
can hear,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, this is the wisdom table. And I can say that when these young ladies go to a so-called beauty parlor, they're already beautiful, but they want to call it a beauty parlor. But when they go to a beauty parlor and they hear some misinformation off the wall, either they're gonna interject their understanding, or they're gonna tell the beautician, "Hurry up, finish, I gotta go." The information does that. It takes you a level higher or more. It doesn't make you better than anyone, but you're out of the herd. The American system is geared to having people think as a herd. Buy paint, buy this, buy that, do this. Wear your pants where they're hanging off your behind. Wear a do-rag.
That's no.
Look at your phone every time you
Every
come out of
time
the
they
train
push it.
station. You can do this on your phone while you're walking down the street.
Yeah, Texan.
So all of that is a part of the herd. The herd. When you step out of that and you no longer do some things, or you begin to read, you are now above the herd and in a position to pull people out of that herd mentality. HERD, as in herd of cattle. That's what you want to do. And you're going to find the biggest resistance coming from your own people. That's conspiracy thinking. They don't even know what a conspiracy thinking is. But you have to keep on going.
Yes.
So I want to thank you all. This has been the Wisdom Table coming to you from East Harlem Community Radio. And our participants today has been
Stroud. Esther Hyatt.
Jenkins.
Eva Varnum.
Lydia Millie.
And now that you have all those names, you can move very quickly on us. I'm Brother Leroy.
We on the list. We on the list.
We on the black list. It's